Okay, I think we can start. So hello everybody. Thank you for joining us for this recurring event. And again, today we have a great speaker, Dr. Monica Koshal. She gave us many talks on ventilations, invasive and non-invasive. And today she will be going to conventional mechanical ventilation, and hopefully she can also include high frequency. So thank you, Dr. Monica, for doing that, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yaya. Great initiative. So we'll be talking on modes of ventilation, and I'll be talking to you about totally basic, so that we understand when we are actually trying to choose the modes. So I'll take you a little history when in 1963, when baby Kennedy was born and premature, and then was not able to breathe because of the respiratory distress syndrome, and was fed to Boston. And then this baby ultimately couldn't be saved in spite of bicarb and all what things which were being given at that time, and died. And then they all started looking into the uh, all ways where we can actually have this ventilation in. So, so the key to success of anything is like an intelligent person and intelligent baby, and not really the machine. So, I mean, though yes, we do talk about machine, but we need to have mind, because it's more like an art rather than science as well. So that was told by Dr. Nick Nelson, Harvard. Um, So now the question is, who need to be ventilated? Like, because we all, my last lectures were all in non-invasive ventilation, and I was very, very strongly recommending that non-invasive ventilation should be the norm. However, if you look at the support trial, that if we are looking at the small babies, 83% of these ELBWs were actually failed, and they required kind of some support of intubation and surfactant. So we do want to give a non-invasive mode, but we might fail, and hence we would be going for invasive ventilation for these babies. And that's why, if you look at the history, we started with CPAP by Gregory, and then we went to high frequency, and then we came back to high flow nasal cannula. And so we are going from starting from same thing and coming back to the same point. However, if you see that uh, uh, whatever we are using, we are not able to actually reduce our BPDs. And hence we should be looking into, when we are requiring to put babies on ventilator or even those non-invasive ventilation, we have to manage the babies well, so that we can actually take care of the BPDs. So concerns of BPD, whatever were the things which were introduced, BPD was not going away. And when we talk about the newborn babies, they have a unique challenges. And the unique challenge about this is that they have a very short time constant. They have a very rapid respiratory rate, and they have a very limitation of muscle strength, and they're very, very compliant chest wall. So this is the problem with our babies, and more preterm babies, more problem it is. So hence they struggle to develop adequate respiratory flow and the pressure. This is the issue. And then we have this is a baby challenge. So then we have a technological challenge as well, that the small babies, the ventilator should be able to understand when the baby is starting to have an inspiratory efforts, when the baby would like to terminate his breath, and how do we measure this tidal volume for these small babies. So this is a technological challenge which we know that it is very difficult, and with the machines, the older machines, it was not possible at all. And with the new machines, it's getting little better. So key to success is to get a proper sensing device so that this device can pick up this weak but effective inspiratory efforts by the baby, and this could help to trigger the ventilator in time. So that is the key to success. To come over all this problem, we should look for a ventilator which is actually having a good sensing device. So, and we should also look for a good triggering techniques. I had talked about the triggering techniques, so I won't put more time on this. That we had abdominal capsule, which we went away. We had a thoracic impedance, and then we have a near the baby pneumotachograph, which is looking at the pressures, and hot wire anemometer, which is looking at the flow and the difference when, as I told last time, when the flow, the heated wires are there and the air is flowing through those heated wires, we know the difference between the flow of the temperature. So the heated wire will be cooled down by this airflow. And so the time which is taken, this over time will give you the volume. So this is how the hot wire anemometer works. And then if we have NAVA, then we can have trigger by the orogastric tube with the diaphragmatic EMG sensors. So these triggering techniques are very important. And when you're buying a new ventilator, you should know that you are going to be, I would prefer a hot wire anemometer, which works the best for our small babies. So the difference is, the main thing which I want to stress here is, forget about anything else. The main thing is response time. Like when my baby wants to breathe, how much time is it taking by these different kind of things which we are using to tell to the ventilator, yes, the baby wants to breathe, and then the ventilator helps us support this breath. So if you see the response time, then the response time with the hot wire anemometer is 40 milliseconds. It should be less than 100 for sure, and lesser it is, the better it would be. So if you look at the others, the response time is too much, and hence we should not be using those. Then the suboptimal design might have a big problem. So if you have a suboptimal design, it can have an excessive trigger. This will also cause an asynchrony, or it may have a problem of failing to trigger or terminate inflation. That will also cause asynchrony. And the tidal volume measurements may be wrongly done, and that may lead to a big issues. So we should always opt for a design which is going to take care of all these problems. So the problem with triggering can cause what all issues. This also we had taken last time, that there could be lack of response because we have not put a trigger right. There could be auto triggering when there could be because of the flow which is happening, and it may be falsely giving an auto trigger, or there could be artifact because of the water inside the circuit, or there could be antiphasic trigger, or it may be a delayed response. So all those problems we must know could be there because of the triggering. And then another big problem for our babies is that we are using uncuffed endotracheal tube, and the measurement of the tidal volume is an issue. Now, when we are using an uncuffed endotracheal tube, there would be a lot of leak, which may be a problem. And this is very important, and you must all look at this, that what is the problem with this leak? And this leak is actually more during inspiration than during expiration. And expiration is the one which is telling a real thing what the baby is doing. So if you see this line, this is the constant leakage which is happening in the circuit. So if we have, so this is the line which is a constant leakage flow which is happening in the circuit. Now we have put a trigger threshold. So the second line is the trigger threshold. So if the trigger threshold is below this leakage line, it's not going to be causing, there will be, what will happen? The the ventilator will keep thinking that the baby is needing more and more, he's reading more and more. And so it will keep on delivering, and there will be a risk of excessive long inspiration time because there will be no termination. So this is a big problem here, and this is a problem here. So if it is below this, the onset of inspiration will be a problem. And if it is the termination criteria is below it, then the inspiration will continue. So either it is not going to get triggered, or if it is triggered, it is not going to get terminated. Both will be a problem because of this leakage. So hence, it is an important, and so the trigger level and termination criteria have to be set according to the leakage flow, and leakage flow is changing frequently. So these two are things. So we should be looking for the ventilators which are taking care of this leakage. So because we can't put babies and cuffed endotracheal tube, and we know that the baby lock, the latest one, has takes care of 70 to 80% of this leakage, and 50 to 60% leakage is taken care by SLE as well. And hence we should look for, and even this other ventilators are there which are taking care of this leak. I hope you understood this. The trigger threshold is low and leak is continuing, we will be not able to trigger. If termination criteria is low because the leak is going on, then excessive long inspiration will be a problem. So go for a ventilator with a leak compensation. So leak compensation is important. So when all the synchronized ventilation modes, the trigger level and the termination criteria are adapted continuously and automatically. So now here if you see, because if you have compensated the leak, the trigger threshold is now up, and hence it is adapted to the leak flow. So the leak is here and the trigger threshold is up now. So now the ventilator knows that the baby wants to be breathing, and so it will deliver the breath. And also if you see, the termination criteria is automatically adapted to the leak flow. So this is the leakage which is happening, and the termination criteria got automatically adapted, and so the ventilator could know that here we want to terminate. So this is the beauty of the leak adaptation. So why we want to go for a leak adaptation? This is the reason we want to go for a leak adaptation. So the benefit of leak adaptation is that we will have less work of breathing, the short trigger delay time, high trigger success rate, low rate of auto-cycling, and we will have exact breath termination, so that we will be providing optimal inspiratory time. And in any given ET tube leakage situation, this will work. Now, let's go to the modes of ventilation now. So when I look into the modes of ventilation, it is like a jargon, and it is just like, moving and making me feel dizzy. Different kind of modes are there, and which one to choose is a question. So like an alphabet soup. So even if you look at the Goldsmith, in one of the chapter, it has talked about a ventilator called a Care Fusion Avia, and this ventilator has 44 choices to the clinician. So please don't go when someone comes to you and says, oh, I have so many choices of ventilation. It is just useless. We should know right what exactly we need. And the last count is 290 names of the modes on 33 ventilators in US alone. So please try to simplify, and you will have different kind of ventilators available. So when you're going to put a baby on a ventilator, you have to have a stepwise approach. So step one is identify the primary control variable, whether you want to use pressure or you want to use volume. Step two would be identify the breath inflation sequence. How do you want it? Whether you want it IMV mode or SIMV mode, how it is. And what is your targeted swing? Are you targeting a pressure or are you targeting a volume? So most of our ventilators in a newborns are, the control is usually the pressure control, and the breath inflation might be different. So our primary control is the pressure control, and the breath inflation we will talk about how it is. So how do we choose the breath inflation sequence? So we have the older versions, which is out of the box, but I still want to let you know, is CMV, where it is controlled mandatory ventilation. Then IMV. So in CMV, like it is totally controlled mandatory ventilation. IMV is intermittent mandatory ventilation. So there will be some breaths which are mandatory, and CSV is continuous ventilation. So these are, all the three are now out of the box because they are not at all synchronized with the baby. So if you see that controlled mandatory ventilation, if you want to synchronize with the baby, then because it is giving continuous, controlled. So what is new if we say it is assist control? So if we are synchronizing the CMV mode, it becomes the assist control. If we are synchronizing the intermittent mandatory ventilation, then it becomes the SIMV, synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation. And if we are synchronizing CSV mode, then it becomes the pressure support ventilation. So continuous support ventilation changes to pressure support ventilation, and CMV changes to assist control, IMV changes to SIMV. So very easy to understand. And then the step 3 is identifying the targeting system. So when you want to identify, don't get confused with so much busy slide. But what I want you to understand here is that you have to know the targeting scheme. So you may have a set point where the set point is that what the ventilator, you are setting yourself on the ventilator. So it is set already. And the different ventilators have different ways to set the this set point. And then there is something which is called that the Servo R. Now this Servo R is, the ventilator is at the same time, when you have set something, you have set your PIP, you have set the rate, you have set the inspiratory time, the ventilator is also taking some information from the baby continuously, that is servo, so that the ventilator would make changes according to the requirement of the baby. So if there is R, this is a servo R. So this means that the ventilator is continuously taking information from the baby as well, and giving, and then making certain changes. So this is important. And then adaptive. Adaptive means once they have taken that information from the baby, now it is going to adapt that, okay, the patient needs to be triggering, so I need to give breath, or I am targeting a volume. So if I reach that much of volume, I should reduce the pressure. So then only if it is adaptive, then only you will have something like pressure regulated volume control or volume targeted ventilation. So these three things I would like you to remember. Now, mostly the ventilators we are using for our babies, it is a time, control, pressure, limited. So TCPL. So identify the primary control. So what in the TCPL, what is our primary control? Pressure. Okay. Then identify the breath or inflation sequence. What is the TCPL? What it is? IMV, intermittent mandatory ventilation. Then identify the targeting scheme. So what do you want to target? So you are going to target the set point. Whatever the set point you have taken, that is the targeting, that you have set this inspiratory time, you have set the PIP, you have set the speed. So that is what you are going to be targeting. So this is the stepwise approach in TCPL. So because you are controlling the pressure, so it is a pressure control. So the rename is come as PC, and it is intermittent mandatory ventilation. So IM, and you have set point IMS. So PC IMS would be the name given to this TCPL. Now let's see what are these intermittent mandatory breaths. How are they? So intermittent mandatory breath means now we are not having any kind of synchronization. So you are giving a certain set number of breaths to the patient and that are not synchronizing. But we are not telling the baby don't breathe. So baby will continue to breathe. So baby will have spontaneous breathing. So the purple color is the spontaneous breathing of the baby efforts. And we know that the baby breaths with the negative this thing. So it will go to the negative deflection. And the breaths are being given by, we don't say breaths when it is being given by the ventilator. We say the ventilator is pushing the thing. So breaths is a name which is given, which is taken by the baby. So breath is not the name given to the ventilator. So ventilator is giving the pressure, and the baby is breathing in between. So if you can see here, the baby is breathing, but there is no breaths which are happening. Again here, baby is breathing, and baby is trying to expire, and the ventilator is inspiring. So there is lot of asynchrony which is happening, and this is actually annoying to the baby, and also will lead to a lot of problems like air leaks and even IVH if this is going to continue. So, so then comes how to take care of this. So now this IMV we are actually synchronizing. So we are going to synchronize. So we are going to have a SIMV. Now what happens is in SIMV, again, we are giving certain number of breaths, and we are putting some inspiratory time. Then we are keeping an trigger, and then the baby is allowed to trigger, and if the baby triggers during that breaths and during the 1/3 of those inspiratory time, that will be synchronized with the ventilator. So this is synchronized very nicely with the ventilator. But however, you see the baby, because you have set 40 rates, but baby is breathing maybe more than 40, maybe 50, maybe 60. So there would be certain breaths which baby has spontaneous efforts, but that they are not falling into those breaths which you have chosen where the triggering can happen. So these would be the breaths which are not synchronized. They are not getting any kind of help. And if you see, this pressure is not generated. So when look at the volume. So the breaths where the baby was synchronizing with the ventilator, the volume is good. But the volume where the baby is spontaneously breathing and not getting synchronized is only equal to the anatomic and instrumental dead space. So this is not enough, and this is going to cause problem. It is going to be like a dead breathing, and it is going to cause more efforts and asynchrony to the baby. So how do we help these babies, these few breaths which are not synchronized? So we will come to that. First we will summarize what SIMV is, that we are selecting a number of breaths which are going to be supported. Other breaths are not getting supported. Patient continues to breathe between those supported breaths. And for those non-supported breaths, patient gets only gas flow to breathe spontaneously. Other parameters like PEEP, eye time and flow are determined by the operators. So uneven tidal volume will be happen. So the breaths which are supported, good tidal volume. The breaths which are not supported, no, very less tidal volume. So this will make the baby to be working hard and making the high work of breathing. How do we come out of this problem? So if we want to come out of this problem, we add something to it. What is that addition? SIMV plus pressure support. Now, what does it do? You are actually supporting those breaths by the pressure, which is really little bit required to give that much of tidal volume and overcoming this anatomic and instrumental dead space. So if you see that when you combine both the things, you have SIMV breaths which are synchronized with the ventilated breaths. This is baby is breathing of his own. The only thing which is helping is there is a pressure support given to these breaths. And because of this pressure support, there will be also the volume which is going to be increased. So this is SIMV plus pressure support. Then assist control. Nomenclature may be different for the different ventilator. Some ventilator will use this name assist control and some ventilator will use the name SIPPV. Both are same. So this is from the CMV. If we are synchronizing the baby's breaths, it comes to assist control or SIPPV. Now here what is happening, you are not choosing the rate now. You are choosing the rate only for the backup. The baby is going to have his own rates. So each breath of the baby, if the baby is able to trigger, is going to be synchronized with the ventilator. So this is the AC inflation. So you can see here, each breath of the baby is synchronized with the ventilator. And hence, what you get is the tidal volume, which is above anatomic and instrumental dead space. So what if you do, of course, baby may stop breathing and baby may go into apnea. So you have to have a backup rate and hence you need to keep a backup rate and the PIP and the PEEP for that. What I would suggest that don't keep a very high backup rate. Supposing if you keep a very high backup rate, then I will tell you what will happen. So what happened in assist control, all spontaneous breaths are synchronized. Rate is decided by the patient and you are going to keep PIP, PEEP, inspiratory time and flow as an operator. And if patient goes apneic, we will have a backup rate and it will go like a controlled ventilation. So less work of breathing, less variable tidal volume, more rapid weaning, and small fluctuations in the blood pressure would occur. So what if you have kept a very high backup rate? So if you have kept a very high backup rate, then if the baby has not triggered the inflation, the ventilator will start giving its uh, 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 its own rate. So this will lead to too much of a untriggered inflations in between. So it may happen that while this untriggered inflation is happening and baby would now want to breathe, there will be a lot of asynchrony between the inspiration of the baby and the expiration of the ventilator. So there will be, all the breaths would not remain triggered. So there would come some untriggered inflations, which we don't want to happen. So how do these different kinds of ventilator modes look like when we see in the pressure volume loop and the flow volume loop? So this is the CMV where you will see all asynchrony is happening, baby is breathing of his own, ventilator is going up and down. So this is like a total asynchrony problem. If we are seeing SIMV, then most of the baby's ventilator and the baby breaths are synchronized. There are few breaths which I said would be asynchronized, and these are the breaths which the baby is breathing in between and the synchronized breaths. So this is how this will look in the flow volume, and this will be how it will look in the pressure volume loop. We talked about it in the last pulmonary graphics, and if you are giving, assisting all the breaths, so you beautiful, it will look, all the breaths are going to be well synchronized. So this is how it will look. So it's the same patient on IMV, SIMV, and assist control. So advantage of synchronization is that when the baby is producing a negative pleural pressure, the ventilator would start recognizing it and would produce a positive inflation. And hence we will be able to give a proper tidal volume at a proper time to this baby. This is the beauty. Now let's see this baby. We'll give an example. A baby was there who was sick, who was doing well, but was having severe anemia, and baby was given blood transfusion. Soon after blood transfusion, the baby deteriorated, and when we did an X-ray, this is what we could see, that there is a trachea, that is lung injury due to the transfusion, and also there is a injury to the intestine due to the transfusion. So TENEC and trachea happened, and so we put this baby on ventilator, and we chose the mode of, if you see, which mode is there. We will take this example and we'll go with the baby, okay? So we see that we have put the baby on the assist control mode, so that all the breaths are being synchronized by the ventilator. And we have chosen a pressure of 18 and a PEEP of 5, and we are delivering tidal volume of, if you saw that the tidal volumes were variable, tidal volume sometimes 7, sometimes 3, sometimes 6. So this is what is happening when we are giving a assist control of ventilation. And you can see another problem which is happening, that there is a gap between the inspiration and the expiration. So that means that there is a asynchrony of the, some asynchrony of the expiration is happening. So this is what I wanted to show. So there is an expiratory asynchrony. This is the problem with the pressure-triggered ventilation. Let me explain with this graph. This is the baby is triggering, and then the ventilator knows it's triggered. So there is a very good synchronization with the inspiration, and you have chosen an inspiratory time. So the inspiratory time is the baby till the till the inspiratory time is chosen, the ventilator will continue to give the inspiration. However, the baby wants to stop his inspiration much before. So, but ventilator will continue to give inspiration, and baby is actually trying to now expire, and the ventilator is still giving inspiration. So initiation of inspiration is synchronized. However, the termination of inspiration is not synchronized here. This is very important, you must understand. See here how there is an asynchrony. Now, how to come out of this problem? How to synchronize your termination of inspiration as well? So the good mode to do that is that you use a pressure support ventilator. Because when you use a pressure support ventilator, the inspiration is decided by the baby itself, and it goes into a time cycle breaths. So if there is a time cycle breath, the difference is that you have actually, what I showed you earlier, that if a time cycle breath is there, the inspiration will continue even when the baby doesn't want to inspire, and that's why there is a holding here. Now, when you go for a flow cycle breaths, this problem is going to get solved, because when the baby, when the flow is reduced to a particular level, 15% or 25%, whatever you are keeping, then the inspiration stops and the expiration starts. So this holding area you will not see when you are using a flow cycle breaths. So this is the beauty. If you want a synchronization of inspiration as well as termination of breath, then you have to choose for a pressure support ventilator which works around a flow cycling breaths. So as if you see in the screen how they will look different. So this is a patient triggered ventilator, that is SIV or a assist control. Inspiration is there, and then there is a gap which is a holding area, and then there will be a expiration. Whereas if it is a pressure support ventilator or a flow cycle breath, you won't see this gap. So there is a beautifully inspiration is ended and the expiration has started. This is how it will look like. So you can see from the graph itself, you will be able to know which mode the baby ventilator is. And same is here. So because the inspiratory time, whatever you have said, pressure is going on and on. But here, because you have, it's not the inspiratory time, but the flow. So beautifully, the pressure comes down when it is really not required. And so the volume also looks very beautifully like a physiological. So the termination criteria, as I said, is the flow. So when it is 100% flow, and during the inspiration, when flow will keep on reducing, and when X number of flow, we have come down to 15 to 20% of the flow, your inspiration will stop and your expiration would start. Whereas here, it will continue till your inspiratory time is going on. I hope we understood. So this is another way to look at the peak flow. When 15% flow stopped, the expiration started. So the pressure support ventilation, all the ventilator breaths are triggered by the patient. Once the breath is triggered, pre-decided pressure is reached at the proximal airway, and near the end of the spontaneous inspiration, drop in flow is registered and inspiratory flow is terminated. So patient has the full control over his rate and over his inspiratory time, both. So as we can see, this everyone must be in all the workshops must have seen in the pressure support ventilator. There is a trigger, there is assistance of each breath. Ventilator respiratory rate, respiration rate is variable because that is by the baby. It's variable in assist control also, but the difference here is the inspiratory time is fixed in all, whereas it would be variable depending on the baby, which is very, very baby friendly. Now, having said that, when we are using any of these modes, what is happening to the volumes? So because we are giving pressures. So let's see if one pushes a big tidal volume into a critter with strapped chest, it doesn't hurt the baby, even when you are having a PIP very high. If you're pushing the same thing to unstrapped chest, that means you might be delivering a large amount of volume with the same pressure, you are going to actually causing harm and you will cause a lung burst. You can see the lung burst. So even when you have not increased the PIP, there might be a chance of the lung burst. Again, if you see, if you're using a high tidal volume with high pressure, it can cause 7-fold increase in the lymph flow and the protein leak. So not only the lung burst, the lymph flow and the protein leak is also having a problem. And if you are strapping this chest by making the, even pressure is high, but the tidal volume is normal, there will be a reduced lymph flow and the protein clearance. So this is important. Where we are heading to, all of you must be understanding that we are going for some volume guarantee, right? So if you're using a high pressure, and this is a low negative pressure and high volume. So high pressure, high volume, low pressure, high volume, high pressure and low volume. There will be less leak, there will be less lung injury, and there will be less albumin in the space. You can see here. So the volume trauma is the main crux of the problems. This is what we understood from these rodents. So then how do we do it? We should go for a volume ventilation. So what is going wrong if we use a volume ventilation? There is a problem. So when we are actually giving a volume, we are not giving volume to the lungs straight away. We are giving volume to the circuit. And the circuit is huge and the baby is very small. So this volume is going to get lost in the circuit. And there will be a kind of a dead space here in the circuit where the air is going to get lost. So this is a big problem, that compression of gas in the circuit, high pressure, low volume is going to get lost in the circuit. And then it also depends on the compliance of the tubings. So when the compliance of the tubing is an issue, again there will be a dead space where the this gas is going to be wasted or dead. Another issue is most of the previous ventilators were sensing this volume near the ventilator. So definitely after that it is going to be not small baby, small volume, what you will get at the end of the ventilator. So this is going to be of no use. Third is there is uncuffed tube. So there is a quite leak which is happening in the from the ET. And also due to the resistance inside, because of the disease process, this leak is going to be furthermore. So this is another issue which we are facing. And the fifth issue which we are facing is the sensor is actually like a, if you are using a big sensor, it will be like a dead space here. So and also we should know that what the sensor is measuring. Is it measuring the inspiratory or the expiratory? Because we are more interested in the expiratory volume than the inspiratory volume. And the good would be which will actually measure the inspiratory as well as the expiratory, so that we know that what is the leak and then compensation can occur. So the solution to this 5 problems is that we should measure the tidal volume near the baby and not here. We should have a circuit which is very not having a very compliant, and the flow of gas should go fast. And we should have a leak compensation from the inspired tidal volume to the expired tidal volume, and compensation can occur. Then only we will be able to have a volume kind of a ventilation in these small babies. That also it will not be a proper volume. So what is the difference between a pressure control versus a volume controlled ventilator? I had explained in my pulmonary graphics as well, because in the pressure controlled ventilator, we are controlling the pressure. So the pressure is going to be there till the inspiration is going to happen, and it will continue to be there till the inspiratory time is being given. And so it will be something like a square wave. Whereas the volume will be achieved depending on what pressure we are giving. And the flow will be a triangular. Whereas in the volume controlled ventilator, because you are controlling the volume, so depending on the volume, the pressure is going to be changing. So the pressure wave will be triangular. And because to give this volume is received by the flow. So the flow has to continue over a time to give a certain amount of volume. And hence the flow over time in the scalar graphic would look like a rectangle. So from seeing this only you can know whether it is a pressure controlled ventilator or a volume controlled ventilator. To see it further, so if the baby is changing, like suppose we have given surfactant and you are doing a pressure controlled ventilation, the ventilator will continue to give the same pressure irrespective of the compliance improved because of surfactant. So what will happen to the baby? The tidal volume is going to increase as the pressure is not decreasing, and hence there will be a volume trauma. But if you're using a volume controlled ventilator, if the baby you are given surfactant and the compliance is improving, then because you are controlling the volume, so the ventilator will go for only that much volume, and hence the pressure will automatically reduce to give that much of volume, because now you have a better compliance. So this is the beauty of a volume controlled ventilation. Let's see in this way. So this is a pressure limited ventilator. This is a poorly compliant lung because surfactant deficient is there. And so it is giving this much of pressure, but the volume increase is not happening that much. Now we have given surfactant. It will continue to give the same pressure, this 20, but because it is pressure controlled. And because you have given surfactant, you are now delivering a very large volume. So we will got polytrauma. In a volume controlled ventilator, this is not going to happen because you are controlling the volume. So the pressure required for this much volume was 20. You have given surfactant, the pressure requirement has reduced. So the pressure will reduce by itself because volume is targeted here. I hope it is understood. So there are pros and cons of the pressure controlled ventilation and volume controlled ventilation. So in the volume controlled ventilation, auto weaning of the pressure will happen as the compliance improves. There will be less fluctuation in the tidal volume delivered, and minute ventilation and POCO2 fluctuations will be less. Volume trauma will be less. However, PIP is not that much controlled, and therefore there might be a situation where you may have barotrauma. And also there is a fixed flow rate. So the patient demand, if it is increasing more than the set flow rate, there will be asynchrony and there will be an increased work of breathing. Whereas in the pressure control ventilator, better gas distribution by exposing the lungs to PIP throughout the inspiratory time, that is good thing. And because of the high initial flow, less work of breathing would be there and less barotrauma. However, variable tidal volume will be delivered and you have to wean the pressure manually. There is a high chance of volume trauma and there will be unpredictable change in the tidal volume with a change in the PIP and PEEP. So this is the difference between the two. We should understand interrelationship between control, limit and target. So control here, as we said, whether you are controlling the pressure or you are controlling the volume. Limit, what safety limit you have kept that above which parameters will not go. And target, that I want to give this much when I will achieve this much target. So that is a hybrid mode, that your parameters would change according to the target what you have set. So these three are very important and you should know the relationship between each one of them. So what is the interrelationship between flow, pressure and volume? So flow is directly proportional to the pressure gradient. So high pressure will be there, will be giving a PIP at the beginning of the inspiratory time, and low pressure would peak at the beginning of the inspiratory time. And then the flow and volume has a relationship. So flow is equal to volume over time. And so what is volume? Flow into time. So how much flow is happening during a particular time will give you that much of volume. So this is the interrelationship between PIP, P, flow, time and volume. This is important. So let's come to the ventilators, different modes what we have now. Pressure controlled ventilation. Basically, this is the mode which we are using for the neonates. So we will use PC, pressure control. And then how the breaths are being handled, second part which you are seeing, which may be different. SIPPV or assist control, SIMV, synchronized intermittent mandatory ventilation, pressure support ventilation, and MMV. Then volume control ventilation, which we don't use. So they will be VC, which is same SIPPV, VC and SIMV, and VC, SIMV plus PSV. And then the hybrid mode, which is, as we said, hybrid mode means we are targeting something. So we are targeting the volume. We are volume targeted mode, volume guarantee, volume assured pressure support, and PRVC. We will be talking of these modes later. So let's talk about volume guarantee. I would say that please don't ventilate your babies without the volume targeted, because I feel that nothing else has helped our babies to come out of this PPD other than this volume guarantee mode. I can say this with great, I'm sure about it. So what is this volume guarantee? We are targeting the volume, still we are cycling with time, and we are limiting with pressure. So it is volume targeted, time cycled, pressure limited. And you can combine with any of the modes: assist control, SIMV, or pressure support ventilation. So what does it do? The operator chooses a targeted tidal volume and selects the pressure limit up to which the ventilator operating pressure may be adjusted. And ventilator would know how much the tidal volume the baby is getting by measuring the exhaled tidal volume of the previous breaths. And then the working pressure will adjust up and down to achieve the set tidal volume. So this is very important. If you see, you have set a Pmax, and the Pmax you usually set 20 to 30% more than the pressure required to achieve that much of tidal volume. Now, what is happening that, supposing you have set, you want to, now I'm just going to a drawback of this tidal volume guarantee. You have set a tidal volume of 6 ml, and you have set, given a particular PIP pressure. Now, when the baby is given this particular PIP, the delivered tidal volume is quite high, 8. But the second breath is still not getting 6. It's still getting 7. And then it is getting 6.5. And then it comes to 6. So there are 3 breaths, last 3 breaths average it takes, and then it will be setting the pressure according to the desired volume. This is important. So it's not that each breath is being targeted. So it's not breath to breath, but there is 3 breaths which are taken into, and the average is taken, and then the ventilator decides what pressure is required by the baby to achieve the tidal volume what we have set. So this is important. So this way you can see like this from here, that you have a targeted volume, and if you have achieved the target volume, it will continue to give the same pressure. But here we have not achieved the targeted volume, but the pressure, it will take time for the pressure to increase before the set tidal volume is achieved. And it may happen due to whatever reasons, the same pressure is giving a high tidal volume. So again, it will take 2-3 breaths. Ventilator will continue to give those high pressure till it really will know that no, baby doesn't require that much of pressure, when it will decrease. So it is not breath to breath, it is after 3 breaths. This is what I want to say. So several breaths are needed to deliver the set tidal volume, and it is designed that we should not be overinflating our lungs. It is geared for slower increase when tidal volume is low and rapid adjustment when tidal volume is higher. In case the tidal volume goes beyond 130% of the set value, this is the time when the inspiration gets terminated immediately. This is very good kind of a, we have a control for getting away from the traumas. So this is the beauty. If tidal volume goes more than 130%, inspiration gets terminated. And also, we should know that there is a separate algorithm for triggered and untriggered mechanical breaths. So both will have a separate algorithm for the tidal volume. So these are the caveats, that guarantee is not guarantee, and it's not accurate if leak is more than 40%. There is a complex patient-ventilator interactions. Large inspiratory efforts are required. Forceful exhalations may occur, and diaphragmatic braking during exhalation may be an issue. So this is the problem. However, advantages are many. Less risk of polytrauma. We almost get stable kind of a tidal volume. Less PIP, especially if spontaneous efforts are present. And it is like an automatic weaning of the PIP. So as the compliance is going to improve, the PIP is going to come down by itself. And weaning happens in the real time. This is a thing. However, if there is a lot of leak, and that's why I'm saying leak compensation is important, it is inaccurate and it may not compensate enough for the large breath-to-breath fluctuations, and delivered tidal volume may not be same as the set tidal volume. So if we look at that same baby, we have put now, because we had put in the assist control mode, and we found that there was an issue with the variation in the tidal volumes, which we saw. So what we did, we are switching on the volume guarantee. Now we have added a volume guarantee, and you have to confirm when you add a volume guarantee. Now, so now PC AC with the volume guarantee is going on. And if you see the same baby, we were giving pressures of 18. You remember? Now you have put a volume, and the volume and the tidal volume was fluctuating from 2 to 9. Here now the fluctuation of tidal volume is not happening, and your pressures have come down to 13. So this is the beauty when you are adding your assist control with tidal volume. Same baby, we only changed, added a VG mode. Pressure requirement is decreased. And fluctuations of tidal volumes are not there. So then the problem with the VG mode is that it is actually, there are two problems. One is that it is taking care of 3 breaths and then giving the next tidal pressure according to the tidal volume demanded. Plus, we have set a pressure Pmax. We have set a Pmax. So if our baby requires pressure more than this Pmax, then there is no way that the ventilator can increase this pressure until unless it will just give alarm that tidal volume is low, you can increase the flow, you can increase the pressure, but it itself will not increase the pressure. So these are the two issues with the volume guarantee mode. So another mode is pressure regulated volume control, PRVC. Now here what we can see, it is pressure limited time cycle mode that adjusts the inspiratory pressure to the target tidal volume. And this is based on the tidal volume of the previous breaths. So how does it differ from the volume guarantee? Now volume guarantee usually started with assist control. What we do is all spontaneous breaths are supported. We are giving more stable tidal volume, better oxygenation and less tachypnea than SMV plus VG. We are setting the tidal volume 4 to 6 ml per kg. If you set a tidal volume more than 8 ml per kg, it may cause volume trauma. Smaller babies need more volume. This you should know, because the volume is getting actually in the lost in the dead spaces in these small babies, because even the sensor has a big dead space. So that's why you may need a higher tidal volume for a smaller baby. And if our baby is going into BPD, again we need a higher tidal volume. So we should know. And but should not go beyond 8 ml per kg, it might cause volume trauma. And adjust within this range 4 to 6 to achieve the desired PCO2. So if a baby is, like as I said, BPD, ventilator dependent, you may go for a higher tidal volume. Why? Because there is a tracheal dilatation which is occurring and there is an increased dead space which is happening. So how do we set a VG mode? As I said, Pmax is set as an upper limit to allow the fluctuations around the average or the working PIP. If you keep too low, frequent low tidal volume alarms will come. If you keep too high, you will have a risk of barotrauma. So generally what we do that we are usually setting 3 to 5 centimeters above the working PIP. And causes of increasing working PIP, persistently high working PIP, frequently low tidal volume alarms. What are the causes of all this? When can you get all this, that you are getting high PIP, low tidal volume alarms? If there is a worsening of the leak, if there is an untriggered inflations, if there is an air leak, or there is a ETT kinking. So these are the problems which you should look for. Or there may be a worsening of the lung, or the ETT has slipped off. So we should know when the alarm is coming, what is happening to our babies. Whenever you are setting an alarm for the tidal volume, you should keep an alarm of less than 90% of the desired tidal volume. So if I am setting a 6 ml per kg of the tidal volume, I should set alarm of 5, not below that. Because low tidal volume alarm will increase the flow rate or increase the Pmax. Then the trigger sensitivity should be at the greatest sensitivity so that it can pick up easily. Keep the circuit free of condensed water because the water movement can trigger the breaths. The usual circuit flow rate should be between 6 to 8 liters per minute because we need an adequate flow rate. And that adequate flow rate, how do you know it is happening or not? By the short plateau. The inspiratory time should last 0.3 seconds. If no P plateau is visible, you should increase the flow and reduce the ETT leak. If this P plateau is longer than the time needed for inflation, then you should reduce the flow. Very rarely we are touching this, but this is what you should be looking at and doing. If you are putting a baby on pressure support with VG, it is the best mode to reduce the flow if inspiratory time less than 0.25 seconds. So as I said, when you are setting the VG, you have to give the PEEP same as PCV. And when you have to wean, you don't need to bother because if you have used VG, PIP will automatically come down as the baby's compliance is going to improve. So if you are using an SIMV VG mode, you will wean only the rate. If you are using assist control with VG or pressure support with VG, because rate is by the baby. So rate is also auto wean, PEEP is also auto wean. So the only thing which you can wean is the targeted tidal volume. So, but don't go below a bottom line of 3.5 ml per kg. And when should you consider extubation? When we have seen that the baby is spontaneously breathing and tidal volume starts transiently exceeding the set tidal volume. So the baby's tidal volume is exceeding the set tidal volume. Or second thing, what we will look at, the MAP has come down. So the pressure requirement to achieve that much of tidal volume is reduced to 8 or to 10. And we are not on a very high tidal volume. We are at 3.5 to 4.5 ml. And when we look at the baby is fine, lungs are fine, blood gases are fine. So this is a time when you can extubate your baby. So how do we refine the volume guarantee? That can be done by using another mode, which is pressure regulated volume control. Now, how does this help refine? Because what is happening is in the pressure regulated volume control, first test breaths are given. When the ventilator will judge how much is the compliance it will calculate the compliance. And the microprocessor will then calculate for this compliance how much PIP is required to deliver the targeted tidal volume. Once this is done, then the ventilator will start giving that much of pressures to give that much of tidal volume. So 3 breaths are given at 75% of the calculated pressure. So when the pressure is calculated, the first 3 breaths are 75% of the calculated pressure. And then the ventilator would judge whether the targeted tidal volume is achieved or not. If the desired tidal, which this is our targeted tidal volume which we want, okay? And so we are giving 3 breaths, 75% of the calculated pressure. So what we saw that these are not giving the tidal volume which we want. So then the ventilator will increase the PIP by 1 to 3 centimeter if the tidal volume is not achieved. And if the targeted tidal volume achieved is much more than the target one, then it will decrease the PIP by 1 to 3 centimeter if tidal volume is exceeded. So this is the way the pressure regulated volume control works. So if you have set a pressure, like what did you set in the volume guarantee? You have set a Pmax. And if the baby required more than that Pmax, ventilator cannot deliver that. But in this pressure regulated volume control, even if you have set a pressure of certain 20 supposing, and the baby requires more, it can increase, the ventilator can increase by itself. And also the ventilator can come down by itself. So this is how the pressure regulated, it can increase the pressure by 3 because the tidal volume is not achieved. Or if the tidal volume is going beyond the targeted tidal volume, it can come down by 5. So it can go up by 3 and it can come back down by 5. So this is the beauty of PRVC. So what is PRVC? What we learned? That it is pressure limited flow cycle mode. PIP is adjusted to the targeted as VT. Clinician sets the tidal VT and the maximum pressure. The first breath in the V is a VC breath, which helps the ventilator to know the compliance. Based on the next breath is delivered at a pressure which will deliver desired tidal volume. And the next breaths are of variable flow. And breath to breath change in PIP is limited to 3 up and 5 below. So it is very much similar to VG, but the compliance is calculated and algorithm is aimed for the lowest PIP to achieve the desired tidal volume. Safety feature is almost similar. Both VG and PRVC are constantly catching up. When we mean by catching up is it's not each breath. It is calculating 2 to 3 breaths and then doing its job. Compensation is not possible during each breath. And more the effort by the patient, less will be the support. So this may be dangerous if effort will go and it will increase the work of breathing. Need for a mode which can compensate in the course of a breath. So we want something breath to breath. Okay. And also we need someone which will give more support if work of breathing is increased. So what can we go for? So this is a pressure regulated volume control. So this is being given till the volume target is achieved, it will give the same pressure. However, if the volume targeted is not achieved, then what is happening? The pressure is increasing. And the pressure is increased further. So this is a learning period time cycle assess control breaths. The drawback of PRVC is it calculates tidal volume done at the ventilator end and not at the airway opening. So it might not be good for our small tiny babies. And then compensation scheme exists to account for loss of the volume in the circuit. But the accuracy is insufficient for use on the newborns. So PRVC not really looked in for newborns. And inspiratory tidal volume is used for calculations. Recently, proximal flow sensors have been introduced. Let's see when those come to the market. Then another mode is the volume assured pressure support. This is the one actually which is assuring breath to breath, not calculating after 2 to 3 breaths. And how is it doing? What it does is that if at particular breath, that particular tidal volume is not achieved, then it is going to keep on giving the flow. So it is going to increase the inspiratory time. You see, this is the inspiratory time, and this is the targeted tidal volume which is achieved. Here, in that inspiratory time, the tidal volume is not achieved. It is only up to here. So same time, the ventilator will know the tidal volume is not achieved. So what it will do, it will keep on giving the flow. So the inspiratory time will keep on going until that tidal volume is achieved. So see, it will be something looking like this. So sometimes what happens, by increasing the flow also, this is not getting achieved like here. Then what it is doing, it is converting into pressure support. So it is increasing the pressure. So this is the beauty of the volume assured pressure support, that it is doing with each breath, guaranteeing the volume what we want to give to the baby by increasing the flow. So target tidal volume not reached. So set flow is prolonged until tidal volume is reached. Targeted tidal volume not reached by big margin. So it will boost the pressure support until the tidal volume is reached. So this is how this volume assured pressure support works. Looks very nice, but not having actually good, in the newborns, we don't have a data. So I hope we have good data when we can talk about it. So till then, we will be going only for the volume guarantee. So what does it do? It sets a pressure limit. It sets a tidal volume, cycle threshold. And if the set pressure limit is giving the tidal volume, it is good, nothing, the ventilator doesn't have to do anything, and flow cycling is happening. However, if the tidal volume is not met, it is going to be, and this can happen if the compliance is decreased, then it is going to keep on increasing the flow. So it is increasing the flow. So the pressure is increased and the tidal volume is achieved. This is how it works. So VAPS combines volume and pressure targeted ventilation within a single breath rather than using breath averaging algorithm. Each breath starts as a pressure limited breath, and if the tidal volume is reached, the breath is terminated as PSV. But if not reached, the breath converts to flow cycle mode by prolonging the IT with passive increase in the PIP. And once tidal volume is reached, it cycles its exhalation. That's how it works. The drawback is inspiratory tidal volume is used for the calculation. Again, not good for our babies. No provision for automatically lowering the PIP as compliance improves. And automatic weaning is not possible. AVR ventilator has volume limit function which terminates inspiration if upper limit of tidal volume is exceeded. This added function reduces the volutrauma and hyperventilation but does not lead to automatic weaning of PIP. So this we should know.
Dr. Monica, can we please have a break?
Huh?
Dr. Ula speaking. Can you please ask for a break now, like 5-10 minutes, or how long is taking you to
finish? This is going to finish, and then we will go for a break, and then high frequency.
Tamam. Okay.
Okay.
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is a volume assured pressure support. This is how it will look like. Then one word only I will talk about: mandatory minute ventilation, MMV. This is a beautiful board where minimum minute ventilation is adjusted by tidal volume and rate. So it is combination of SIMV plus VG plus PS. So we were very happy with SIMV with PS that it is supporting the baby, but then the volume guarantee was not happening. So when we combine volume guarantee to that mode, it is MMV, mandatory minute ventilation. As soon as the patient exceeds the minute ventilation, rate of mechanical breath will reduce automatically. And tidal volume can be controlled with the help of VG. So it is a very nice mode, and this is how it will be When there is no spontaneous breathing, it is mandatory ventilation. When beginning of spontaneous breaths is happening, spontaneous breaths are seen, then it will be spontaneous mandatory ventilation is happening. And when you have sufficient spontaneous breathing, it will totally wean off. So it is a very good weaning mode. And I will just end with this, that we put this baby on this MMV and look at the beauty. We could just wean the baby off the ventilator. So whenever the baby is actually triggering, what you can see is the color will change. So when baby will have his own spontaneous good efforts, you will see the color will change. And this is blue is not the one. You will get that brown pinkish color when you know that the baby is ready to be weaned off. See, these breaths have started to come. And when you see all these spontaneous breaths are coming, you will wean the baby off from the ventilator. It started again. So these spontaneous efforts are some, and then you will see the baby will have, because we were sedating, we were doing other things. So when we have taken it off, baby is sleeping, then also it may happen. And when everything is fine, baby will have a spontaneous breaths and baby lungs are improving here, and we can actually take him off from the ventilator. So these are the different modes which I wanted you to be clarifying. See, and be careful, it is not only machine but man behind the machine. So this machine has no brain, so please use your own. Thank you, and we'll take a break. If I have any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Dr. Monica. If anybody has any question, please raise your question and you can write it. And this is a break time now, like for 10 minutes. We'll be back by 6:30 for the high frequency.
Yeah.
If anybody is having any question, you please write it down, or you can please unmute yourself and ask your question. Dr. Monica, you will stay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any question?
So far, nothing. There is a question from Netra Rana. What should be pressure in PSI mode when combined with the SIMV?
Yeah. So when you're combining with SIV, you're not not giving the full SIV pressure. So you are usually you will be using 3/4 of the pressures which we are using for the SIV pressures. So you're not going to be using the full because you're just supporting those breaths just to achieve the tidal volume.
I received a private question from Dr. Muhammad. What is the maximum time can be used in the pressure ventilation mode, PSV mode?
I couldn't hear you.
What is the maximum I time can be put in a pressure ventilation mode, PSV mode?
Pressure support mode, you mean?
Yes.
We don't set an inspiratory time in the pressure support mode. As I said, baby is going to determine his inspiratory time. So it is the flow cycle. You see, it's a flow cycle ventilation. And so the baby, if you, I think then I'm not able to, that they have not done much of it. So how the termination criteria for the pressure support ventilation is the flow, not the inspiratory time. So you are actually, when the flow is coming down to 25 to 15% of the maximum flow, then that is the time when the inspiration would stop. So it's not the, we are not setting the inspiratory time in the PSP mode.
Okay, I hope this answers your question, Doctor. Well, new question from Dr. Ahmed Ali Ahmed. Sometimes, and while the baby is on SIPPV mode plus VG, the result of the ABG shows hypocapnia. And even when they decrease the VG to 4 ml per kg, still the problem continues. How can we solve that, please?
If there is a hypocapnia, means you need to wean the baby off and take him out of the ventilator, I feel. So, I mean, if you are coming low on the, if you have come low on the volume, still the baby is having hypocapnia, means the baby is ready to be weaned off.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, doctor.
Put him on an NIPPV or put him on a CPAP, whatever you are okay with.
Sorry, doctor. Can I have an intervention, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Baby was still in RDS, sometime in RDS, and he is very tachypneic, respiratory rate about 100 or 110, and he has hypocapnia while we on SIPPV plus volume guarantee. So how can we solve this? He is already tachypneic.
Sedate or extubate?
Oh, sorry, doctor.
Sedate or extubate?
No, intubation, intubated.
I know. Sedate or extubate if you are wishing.
Not sedated, not sedated.
No, the answer is sedate or extubate. He's giving you answer.
Sedate and then extubate. I said, no, sorry, thank you.
Either sedate or extubate.
Either sedate, yes, I got it. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay,
so,
there.
Monica, for being intrusive.
Yeah. Dr. Yahya, you have answered one of the questions which has been raised. To check the ET tube while doing INO is as usual to go by auscultation, X-ray, and ultrasound of the lung.
Dr. Monica can comment on that if you want. He's asking how we check for ETT while giving inhaled nitric oxide. I don't think there is any peculiar things to do between with or without inhaled nitric oxide, but you can answer the question if you want.
I couldn't get the question. How do you check ETT is in place when you give nitric oxide? That's the question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Whether you give inhaled nitric oxide or you give ventilation or you give surfactant, you should know your ETT is in a proper position. So I don't know why is it different when you give inhaled nitric oxide.
So you auscultate, good bilateral symmetrical air entry. You do X-ray to check the tube level. You can do CO2 detector or capnography, either main or side stream, or you can do also ultrasound, lung ultrasound, or you can look at your graphics and loops. It's clear when you're extubate from the graphics and loops. So I don't see any difference between with or without.
The same thing,
ventilation.
Can I add to that question? Because we cannot see the volume on on the loops or in the graphics when we put the baby on inhaled nitric oxide through the ventilator.
No.
So my question is,
no.
Yes,
why you cannot see?
Usually it becomes a very big leak, so you cannot see it. You cannot see the graph.
You need a valve. You need a valve. You're missing a valve in the circulation, a valve between the inhaled nitric oxide and the machine, a one-way valve. Because if there is a leak, that's mean the inhaled nitric oxide going in and coming out. So the nitric oxide is one-way valve. So you need either to put a filter or one-way valve. If there is a leak, that is not proper use of inhaled nitric oxide, which means because if there is a leak, that means the baby is sending some air to the nitric oxide.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there is a problem in the connection. I been using nitric oxide for 11 years. I never had a leak.
Okay.
Leak is a very important thing, and you have to be very careful on the failure of your ventilation on that. So yeah, I have also not seen that that you cannot see the volume.
No, Dr. Monica, I think there is on the connection. It should be one way from inhaled nitric oxide to the circulation. It's exactly when you do, for example, nebulization. when you connect the nebulizer, it should not, the ventilator should not send any air to the ventilator. Otherwise you have a leak. It should be one way. It should not be two ways. Like when you use, for example, high frequency jet, because high frequency, when you put it on the conventional or on the CPAP, it's a two-way because there is turbo. So, but in inhaled hydrochloric acid, it should be one way, not two ways, and there should be no leak.
Okay, thank you.
Now, if you have two-way, it will be a big issue because you will not be delivering the right amount of nitric oxide also.
Dr. Monica, there is a question from Dr. Imad. What is your preferred mode of invasive mechanical ventilation to start for a preterm who has hyaline membrane disease?
I'm using this for years, whatever people say, but I'm using assist control with VG mode.
Same here.
Same here.
Or if you look, I did the Cochrane review, or you can start elective high frequency. Like if you have very sick baby or you have very small babies and you want to do a lung protection strategy, especially if you have high frequency jet, not oscillator, you can start, like in babies, for example, in my previous unit, we do 25, 24, 23 right away on high frequency jet. Not because it's a preferred mode, but it's a protection strategy. But I use ACVG always because I think this is the best. But however, you start with the mode that you know, the mode that you're comfortable, the mode that your staff can execute it in a very good way. But by evidence, if you look at Willer and Kevin and Peter Davis, when they did their meta-analysis, the best is ACVG. And I've used it for like years.
Okay. There was one question, or actually a request from Dr. Iman to re-explain the time cycle pressure limited. I think, Dr. Iman, you might get a chance to go through the YouTube channel again, because I don't think the time will serve us for today to repeat again. We still have to go through the high frequency. What do you think, Dr. Yahya?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we are now almost 1 hour.
Yeah.
Well, more than 1 hour, actually.
Yeah, it's 1.5 hours, and we have like 30 minutes left for the high frequency. So, Dr. Iman, if you can go through the YouTube channel to go through the link again.
And Dr. Monica can tell us how long she wants for the high frequency.
We can start?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So I will try to go less on the theory part of the high frequency, more on the practical part of the high frequency ventilation. Why do we need? The major indication is as a rescue ventilation when we fail on the conventional ventilation. Dr. Yahya said he uses as a primary mode. So some of the people are using as a primary mode, but I think Cochrane doesn't say this and as a primary mode, yes, but if you should have a very low threshold to change to a high frequency ventilation, especially if you have a very bad ARDS, because you will be, the lungs will be protected, you will give them less volume trauma and PIE and then BPD. And again, mode to avoid barotrauma. And again, as I said, primary mode in VLPW, we are not sure. So people have different opinions. And it is defined by FDA that any ventilator which is delivering more than 150 breaths per minute is a high frequency ventilator. And the beauty is that it delivers a small tidal volume, usually less than or equal to anatomical dead space. And these are classified by their exhalation mechanism, whether exhalation mechanism is active or it is passive. So if the exhalation mechanism is active, it is HFOV, high frequency oscillator ventilator. If the exhalation mechanism is passive, then it is a JET or HFPPV, which we used to use a high frequency positive pressure ventilation. When we didn't have a high frequency ventilator, we were using during my training period in my MD, and HFI. So why do we talked about the pressure volume loop, and we talked about the various traumas, and we know that where is the safe zone window when we will have less injuries. So if we are recruiting de-recruitment area, atelectatic area where a lot of pressure is required to and will change only small volume, FRC is less. Or if you have gone too high, distension area where again too much pressure when you will change and very little volume will be changed. Both these areas are area of zones of injuries, and we want to ventilate our babies into the safe zone, which is called a safe window. Now, to ventilate our babies in the safe window, you will be causing less pressure and the volume swings. This is the idea. So when you are ventilating a baby on a CMV mode, there are swings between the zones of injury from inspiration to expiration. When you are, so this is inspiration time when you can have injury, and then this is expiratory time when you can have injuries. When you are having a high frequency oscillator ventilator, I will be talking on HFOV because that's what I use. The entire cycle operates in the safe window zone. You can see here, and hence it avoids the injury zones, both the lower as well as the upper zones it avoids. This is the reason why we are using the high frequency ventilator. Now, if you see the airway pressure waveform of high frequency at the ventilator end, and then when it goes down to the airway, and then when it reaches the alveoli, this is how it is at the ventilator end. Then the airway is like this, and by the time it reaches the alveoli, it is very smooth and small airway pressure waveforms. In conventional, at the ventilator, it is like this. Hardly there is a change till it reaches the alveoli. So that's the reason that the CMV, the pressure exerted by the ventilator, propagate through the airway with little dampening. Dampening doesn't happen. And with HFOV, there is attenuation of the pressure as air moves towards the alveolar level. Thus, with the CMV, the alveoli receives the full pressure from the ventilator, whereas HFOV, there is a minimal stretching of the alveoli and therefore less risk of trauma. So what is the physiology of HFV? So what we are doing is we are optimizing the FRC, okay, and minimizing the cyclical stretch of the lungs. So you see here, so we are optimizing the FRC, okay, and then we are minimizing this injury. So that's why. So we are optimizing FRC and minimizing the cyclical stretch of the lungs, and hence it maintains relatively high MAP and a low phasic volume and low pressure changes. This is it. So why we want to put a baby on HFOV? Because we want to oxygenate and ventilate the baby with an adequate lung volume while minimizing the barotrauma and not giving a oxygen toxicity. So my major concern is this oxygen toxicity. If I'm going higher on the FiO2, I don't want my babies to be having oxygen toxicity because I know it's going to cause oxygen-free radical injuries to the brain, to the eyes, to the lungs, to the intestine, everywhere. And hence, if my baby is going requiring a higher oxygen or requiring a higher pressure, I would go and switch to the HFOV. And people have given the indications of QI, OI more than 15 to put the baby on the high frequency. Now, when I'm putting the baby on a high frequency ventilator strategies, there are two strategies, high volume strategy and a low volume strategy. I'm not going into all those details because time shortage, I just don't want to go. It's a big, it will take days if I want to finish the HFOV otherwise. But what I want to say is the studies which were done earlier on had failed and shown failure because they were all using low volume strategies. And we all have gone away from the low volume strategies and we go for a high volume strategies. Now, So the often forgotten is the optimizing lung inflation with MAP. So if you see A area is under inflation, B is optimal inflation during inspiration, C is overinflation, and D is optimal inflation in weaning. So we want our babies with B and D. So in how to achieve in the high volume strategies, the optimal inflation is majorly we can see by the X-rays. Now, when we are doing a conventional ventilation without the X-ray also, you can see how much is the chest expansion and then how much is the rise of the chest. And so you can optimize your pressures just by looking at the baby's chest. Here also you can actually look at the how much is the chest expansion by going on the side of the baby and looking at it. But finally, you will be able to know by your X-rays. So how do you measure is you will look at the top margin of the right dome of the diaphragm, and it should be at around 9 rib. And lung aeration in the X-ray should look good. Overinflation will be when your top margin of the right dome of the diaphragm is at the 10th rib. And there is an intercostal bulging. And when would you say underinflation? When the top margin of the right dome of diaphragm is below 8th rib and the under-aerated lung fields are C. So this is how you will see. So this is a baby who's on high frequency. And if you will count the ribs, there are around 8. And so it's like 7.5. So you can go higher. But if you went too high, you are going to cause this pneumothorax to the baby. So this is like a overinflated. That was like a underinflated. So you have to have a normal inflated lungs. So usually the high volume strategy is used as a lung recruitment strategy, and they are used only for preterm and term infants with RDS or surfactant inactivation due to any other factor like meconium aspiration syndrome or pulmonary hemorrhage. The lung recruitment might be harmful if you have a baby who has a hypoplastic lung, and if you have a baby with a CDH, you have to be very careful on them. And primary PPHN is not a problem with the lungs. It is a problem not with the lung alveoli as such. So in those babies, if you will go for a high volume strategies, you may be doing more harm. So this you have to be understanding what for you are using. Now, when we are using a high frequency ventilator, we are in the conventional mode of ventilation, we were using PIP, we are using PEEP, we are using inspiratory time, you are using expiratory time, you are putting rate, and you are looking at the map. Now, and then you are setting an FiO2. Now, in a high frequency ventilator, what you are going to do is you are going to set only few things. One is frequency. Second is amplitude. Third is your map. And fourth is your FiO2. So how do we do it? That's we will see one by one. Range of the high frequencies between 6 to 15. Now, optimal frequency of oscillation may be different in different disease states that we must understand. If we have a very small babies, you will use a higher rates. In a term, maybe you will use around 8 to 10, ELBW 15 and VLPW 12. Lower frequency 6 to 8 are used for babies with meconium aspiration syndrome with air trapping. It's used for babies who are ventilated for more than 2 weeks, where we know that the airway resistance is increased. Babies who have pulmonary hypoplasia or who has a very stiff lung, that is a time when we are going to use a lower frequency. Some people say, forget about this difference in frequency and just use 10 for all. But I do differ in for different babies. Now, the practical issues are when you are using why this came here anyway. The practical issues are you are using an amplitude and you are putting a frequency. So you should know that whenever you are putting you are choosing any of these, if you have a small change in any of these, it may produce a large change in the CO2 elimination. And hence, you should have a monitoring of the PCO2, or you can have a transcutaneous or tracheal CO2 monitor. And you should avoid wide fluctuations in the PCO2 levels. Whenever you're doing ET suctions, you should increase the MAP by 2. Now, there could be troubleshooting during HFOV. Persisting hypotension may be there. If it is there, then give additional volume of 10 ml per kg of saline. Consider overdistension and reduce MAP and see the response. So we should be very, very careful when you are putting a baby on high frequency and you are overinflating, that may be a problem and causing hypertension. So whenever you are putting a baby on a high frequency ventilator, don't go away from the baby. Stay there to see that if you have used a proper kind of a pressure. What if the baby is having a cystic new BPD? And if you are using a high frequency ventilator on these babies, you may actually worsen the lung injury. You may increase the size of the cyst and the secretions may cause atelectasis. There may be a transient improvement, but there will be a big loss. And so there may be a short-term gain, but long-term pain. So you have to be very careful in babies with cystic new BPD. What is new in the HFOV? Now we were talking about CO2 problems, and small change in things might have a big change in the CO2. So new thing in the high frequency is volume guarantee. The new thing in high frequency is that you can give high frequency from the nose, that is non-invasive. We have a better monitoring during HFOV, and also there is another thing approach is open lung approach. We will take them one by one. So HFOV came, and then HFOV with volume guarantee came, and we are seeing babies. Our clinical strategy to have a baby with achieved stable blood gases, a baby whom we can stabilize and recruit the alveoli and reduce the strain and stress. So again, approach of the HFOV comparing HFV and conventional is inside the device. This is how conventional is, as I told earlier, and this is how HFOV. And as we reach the alveoli, dampening is happening in the HFOV. Now, in the preterm babies, when do we start giving HFOV? So as I said, some of them are using as a primary mode when you have a very bad, severe ARDS. But mostly we are using as a rescue mode when we have severe RDS and we are failing on the conventional ventilator, when we have pulmonary hypoplasia, when there is an air leak syndrome, if you are suffering from recurrent pneumothorax, or you have already getting a pulmonary interstitial emphysema. Other indications are congenital diaphragmatic hernia and meconium aspiration. So the initial setting would be whenever you are, because we are using as a rescue mode. So baby is already on a conventional mode of ventilator and he's on some MAP. So usually if you don't have a baby who has an air leak, you will be choosing a MAP 2 to 3 centimeter above the conventional ventilation. And then if you have a baby with an air leak, you will choose the same or one MAP below the conventional ventilation. Amplitude, how do you choose? To begin with, you don't know what is going to happen. Wriggling you will see only when you put the baby on the ventilator. So 2 times the MAP, you can choose to begin with the amplitude. And then you should look at the baby and look at the oscillations. The baby wriggling should be there. And the wriggling should not be below the umbilicus. If the wriggling is below the umbilicus, that means it is too much. And so you have to reduce the amplitude. And frequency, as I said, depends on the ELPW term baby. And if you have a very small baby, you may go for a 12 hertz, 12 to 15. If it is a medium baby, then 10 to 12. And if it is a term baby, 8 to 10. And I/E ratio, you will keep 1:2. The advantage to use early on in preterm is that we will be able to recruit our baby's lungs well. And there will be a dramatic effect in infants whose primary pathophysiology is decreased lung inflation. And once we are able to open the lungs, then it is possible to maintain the lung inflation with lower distending pressure. So that open lung strategy, like you open the lung and then you can keep them open easily. And we will talk about it. This will improve ventilation at the lower pressure and volume swings in the lungs. It provides a more uniform lung inflation and hence it will reduce the air leak. This is the advantage. When to use HFV in PPHN? I have found it to be very, very useful. At the moment I find PPHN, I put the babies on HFOV. And especially if the PPHN is complicated by severe RDS, PPRM, pulmonary hypoplasia, it actually improves the lung inflation by improving the VQ match, improving the gas exchange, and pulmonary vasodilatation. So whenever you're putting the baby on a HFOV, you have to monitor the baby closely, looking at the lung expansion. Clinically, as I said, stand there, look at the chest, how much is inflated, and then do the X-ray. Do a close monitoring of the blood gas. I always say, once I put a baby on the HFOV, after 1 hour, do an X-ray, do a blood gas. But till that 1 hour, you should be standing there looking at the chest, how much is the inflation of the chest clinically. And if you have, you should have a transcutaneous carbon dioxide monitoring. Monitor the blood pressure very closely, and important is to keep the clear airways. HFOV is very oscillation dependent. So if there is a secretions, it will not work well. With the wiggle factor. So as I said, reassess after positional changes. If chest oscillation is diminished or absent, if it is not there, then you should see why it has happened. It may happen because there is a decreased pulmonary compliance, or there could be a disconnection of the ET2, or the ETT is obstructed, or it may happen when there is a severe bronchospasm. So you should look at that. If the chest oscillation has become unilateral, then it could be due to ET displacement. It has gone to the right side, or it could be due to the pneumothorax on the side where wriggling is not happening. So we should be looking at the wiggling. It gives us a good clue what is happening to the baby. Then how do you select the amplitude? As I said, that we should select 2 times the map and then look at the wiggle, which should extend above the umbilicus. And just keep on adjusting if it is not happening and follow the wiggle. And then once you have set the amplitude, looking at the wiggle, then the amplitude has to be changed depending on your carbon dioxide, which may be a PaCO2 or TCO2. So our goal, remember, is not to achieve a normal PCO2 and pH, but our main goal is to minimize the villi. The limitation is if we have an airway disease or airway obstruction, it may worsen the air trapping. If we have a baby with a shock or hypertension, it may further decrease the venous return and poor cardiac output. So this you should be remembering. Now we will come to each parameter, what are they doing. So oscillation around a set mean airway pressure. Amplitude of oscillation will give the tidal volume of the oscillations, and then the oscillatory frequency, inspiratory to expiratory ratio, and the inspirator oxygen concentration. These are the parameters which we are going to look at. And what to do with them, that is what we need to see. So in the conventional ventilation, what we had seen that the carbon dioxide and oxygen go hand in hand by the parameters. So if we have higher PCO2 and lower oxygenation in the conventional mode of ventilator, what we do, we increase the PIP, and that will help both. In the high frequency ventilation, to some extent, not completely, but to some extent, the oxygenation and the carbon dioxide, they are independently working from each other. So the influence on the oxygenation is by only two factors in a high frequency ventilation. One is the FiO2. If you are increasing the FiO2, your oxygenation is going to improve. The other is MAP. If you are increasing your MAP, your oxygenation is going to improve. So optimize the lung volume and thus the alveolar surface area for the gas exchange. Recruit the electrolytic alveoli, that is how the MAP is going to help. And it prevents the alveoli from collapsing. So de-recruitment is not happening. Also, don't go too much to avoid over distension. So this is about the oxygenation. What about the carbon dioxide? So what is influencing the carbon dioxide in your high frequency ventilation? So amplitude, oscillatory amplitude is major factor, and the other factor is your frequency. So the oscillatory amplitude, if you are increasing, it will increase the tidal volume, and hence the CO2 will be decreased. So we have baby log, VN600 and VN800, which provides a direct adjustment of amplitude in the MBAR. The maximum oscillatory amplitude is strongly influenced by what? By your patient circuit, by the water level in the humidifier chamber, by the frequency and I/E ratio. So you should look at all these factors when you are seeing the amplitude. And I already said, when you don't have a wiggling, your amplitude is missing, that means something is gone here wrong. Patient circuit may have gone, ET tube must have come out, there might be secretion or water in the thing. So all these factors, or as I said, if one side, the pneumothorax might have happened, tube might have got to one side. All these three factors are influencing your amplitude. So pressure is never ever ventilating a patient. It is just the moving force of the gas flow. And carbon dioxide can only be removed by alveolar gas exchange, and this can be done by a tidal volume. Now, how do we achieve this? If you look at conventional ventilation, the minute ventilation is equal to tidal volume into frequency. Here, we are not looking into minute ventilation, and this minute ventilation is telling how much is the carbon dioxide going to be affected in the conventional ventilation. In the high frequency oscillation, it is the DCO2 which we are seeing, and it depends on tidal volume square into frequency. So it is a tidal volume square into frequency. And hence, you can see the major difference between the conventional and the HFOV. That HFOV, the relation between carbon dioxide removal, frequency and tidal volume is different. So it is tidal volume square frequency. So if you make a little change in the tidal volume, it's going to give a huge change in the DCO2 and huge change in the carbon dioxide removal. So if we are increasing the oscillator volume by increasing the amplitude and we are reducing the frequency, both of them are going to increase the DCO2, and by increasing DCO2, we are reducing the PCO2. And hence, to improve the carbon dioxide removal, you will increase the amplitude and you will see what happened to the tidal volume. And if this does not improve the carbon dioxide removal, then only you consider decreasing the frequency. So don't touch the frequency right away. I want to give example why, because why everyone will think, oh, when I am increasing the rate, carbon dioxide should wash off. Why it is not washing off? Even if you look at the formula, then VT square, at least some effect is there if we increase in the frequency. So I should increase the frequency. So I will give you example, visual, to say why it doesn't happen. So this is the time, and we are using 4 Hertz. I'm just giving one example because visually you will be able to see better. If we are giving 4 Hertz and comparing with the 8 Hertz, see what's happening. When we are giving 4 Hertz and when you're giving 8 Hertz, what the difference you can see? When you're giving 4 Hertz, the volume displaced is quite more. And volume displaced has a square effect on the carbon dioxide. When you're giving 8 Hertz, the volume displaced becomes very less. So if you're increasing the frequency, you are actually decreasing the volume displaced. So you are decreasing the tidal volume, and hence square of that will be reduced. And that's the reason lower frequencies would have a larger volume displacement and improved carbon dioxide elimination. I hope you understood this. Then we are saying that, and you must have seen, whenever you're putting a baby on a high frequency ventilator, you may have a washout of carbon dioxide very soon. So to overcome that, one, as I said, we should use a TCO2, a continuous carbon dioxide monitor, do a repeated blood gases, look at the wriggle. But all these may not help, and we may get a help with a simple thing added, as we added in the conventional ventilator, volume guarantee. So when you use a volume guarantee in a conventional ventilator, as the volume is being achieved, your pressure is going changing. So pressure regulation is happening. When you add a volume guarantee to the high frequency ventilator, the volume is constant, and with the change in the volume, what is regulated is not MAP, but amplitude here. Because this is amplitude is the one which is going to be directly leading to the volume. So we will add a volume guarantee to our HFOV. So HFOV with volume guarantee. So HFO volume guarantee can compensate for change in resistance and compliance of the lung and circuit. The HFO volume guarantee can stabilize the ventilation and blood gases, and hence the potential to prevent uncontrolled hyperventilation, uncontrolled hypocarbia, and hence it will reduce the risk of PVL. This is very well available by Draeger, and they have made it as patent, and we are using them. I'm not actually promoting Draeger. I'm just giving the usefulness of volume guarantee. So we don't want hypocapnia to occur. So now what are our goals of adjusting the MAP? Now we already said that, okay, we will be keeping the MAP 2 above the conventional ventilation, but what are our goal of adjusting the MAP? What we want? We want a balance of lung recruitment versus the overinflation, because we don't want air leaks to happen. So we want an optimal ventilation on the pressure volume curve, so that we should have best oxygenation, point of best compliance, and lowest possible MAP to achieve this, so that the pulmonary blood flow should not be decreased. So we don't want this, we don't want this, we want to be clear. How do we do that? So there is one lung recruitment maneuver strategy. I think this is not clear. We'll go here. This is more clear. So what we do that, we set a mean airway pressure at 6 to 8 centimeter of water and adjust the FiO2 to give saturation of 90 to 95, which may be 70, 80, whatever. And then we start increasing the MAP 1 to 2 centimeter every 2 to 3 minutes, and reduce the FiO2 stepwise 0.05 to 0.1 to maintain the saturation of 90 to 95. This will give this. So we will be somewhere here. Okay, we don't want to be here. We have just found that where will be that point. And then we stop increasing the MAP when FiO2 is smaller than the 25%, or when FiO2 is not able to be decreased with the increase in the MAP. So we stop there. And then when we stop there, we stop decreasing MAP 1 to 2 every 2 to 3 minutes until saturation falls. So, oh sorry. So this is here. So here is the maximum where this over is started, and this is when the saturation has started falling, 0.4 and 0.2. And where do we keep now our baby? We recruit the lung again by returning to the known points, that was step 3 for 2-3 minutes, and then decrease MAP above the closing pressure from step 4. So we come here and then we go here. So we reach somewhere here. This is one way to do it. And the other way to do it, very simple, was to keep 2 above the conventional mode of ventilation. And then you...
how many minutes more, Dr. Monica?
Just 5 to 10 minutes more.
Oh.
And then you do the x-rays and look at it. So when you use volume guarantee, it will reduce your if you look at the different studies, it has shown that when you use volume guarantee, you are going to be having a proper tidal volume, and you will be preventing a overventilation. So these are the evidences which I wanted to show, where if you are using a volume guarantee, you will have more time of ventilation during the target tidal volume and less during under or over. And they have shown that the preterm infants with high frequency ventilator, which are combined with volume guarantee, they have reduced outcome of death or BPD or hypercapnia compared with those who are actually not being used volume guarantee. So there was a pilot study which also showed that volume guarantee helped our small babies to prevent hypoxia and hypocapnia. So Drager is the one which has started using this volume guarantee. So I'm just going to finish with this protocol, what one can use. That you will fix a tidal volume, which is 1 to 2 ml per kg for the high frequency ventilator. And you will fix the frequency, and you know that tidal volume square into frequency is causing the DCO2. And as we already know that if you're using the tidal volume, then the DCO2 is going to increase, which will reduce the PCO2. If you add VG with this, then the tidal volume will remain constant and DCO2 will remain constant and PCO2 will remain constant. So the clinical studies have shown that when you are using this tidal volume, the carbon dioxide and DCO2 have remained constant. So you don't get hypocapnia and you don't get overventilated. So what is our target DCO2? So whenever you're putting a baby on a ventilator, you should know what is the target DCO2. We said DCO2 is frequency into tidal volume square. So usually it is 1 to 2 ml per kg. So depending on the weight, it will increase. So 1 kg baby, the tidal volume will be 2. So 2 into frequency. So you will have, and this depends on the frequency you are using. So it will be 60 for a 1 kg baby. For a 2 kg baby, it will be 240. For a 3 kg baby, 540. And for a 4 kg baby, 960. Because you will multiply it with the weight. So this is how, when you are setting a high frequency ventilator, you should see what DCO2 baby is getting and whether the baby is getting the DCO2 what it is desired. So we select the frequency of 12 to 13 for VLPW for term 8 to 10. Tidal volume we set 2 ml per kg, and DB max we set 30 to 40 centimeter of water to begin with. which is usually twice as MAP. And with the tidal volume, this amplitude will keep on changing depending on how's the compliance of the baby. Selecting of the MAP would be 2 above the current MAP, and I/V ratio will be 1:2. And then we will monitor the tidal volume, achieve DCO2, and also we will do blood gases and steam. So the frequency, as I said, will depend on the baby. If it is a smaller baby, higher frequency, term baby, meconium, lower frequency. So this we have already set, and we have to set the lower limit and the upper limit as well for the volume. And the step 4 and 5 is that we should be looking at the mean airway pressure and mean intrapulmonary pressures, and setting the inspirated I/2 ratio as 1:2. Usually that is what we are keeping. And then we are looking at the baby's inflation by keeping the map. We will be monitoring the babies by looking at the heart rate, X-rays, saturations, transcutaneous oxygen, and urine output, and obviously we will be doing the blood gases. Troubleshoots: if you have hypoxia, what you should do? You should increase the FiO2, or you can increase the MAP if your lungs are underinflated, guided by the X-ray. If you have hyperoxia, decrease the FiO2, because we don't want hyperoxia. And also, if it is overinflated, then you will decrease the MAP. If not overinflated, please don't start decreasing the MAP. Decrease the MAP only when your FiO2 has come down below 30%. If you have hypocarbia, reduce the tidal volume by 0.1 to 0.2 ml per kg, and be mindful to remain within the range of tidal volume for frequency selected. So if you have selected 10, this should be the tidal volume. Low, don't go lower limit or above the limit of the tidal volume. So if you have hypercapnia, then check for the chest wiggle and evaluate for the dope. Consider reducing the MAP, because too much of MAP will also cause hypercarbia. If your set tidal volume is reached, then you can increase the tidal volume by 0.1 to 0.2. But if your set tidal volume was not reached, then you will increase your amplitude max so that you can wriggle more. And so you can increase the Dmax. If that's not the case, then you will reduce the frequency. So that this is frequency reduction to take care of the CO2 would be the last step by you. Extubation and the nursing care. Time of weaning would depend on the lung disease, and usually 8 to 10 centimeter of water when you reach, you will try to wean. You don't need to wean the frequency. You don't need to wean the amplitude, because if you are using the volume guarantee mode. And we convert CMV before considering extubation. And while we are treating the babies on high frequency, you should give some fentanyl infusion, but we don't use paralysis. Suctioning should be done minimum, but done only if needed, and that also to be done in the online suction. When should you do suctioning? Routine suctioning should not be done. You have to do only when there is a decrease or absent wiggling, or decreased saturation or transcutaneous oxygen levels are there, or carbon dioxide has increased. Because if you do more suctioning unnecessarily, you will be de-recruiting the lung volume. And always suction should be done under a closed suction system. You may require a sustained inflation recruitment when you are following a suctioning. So the learning points are: MAP is based on the conventional ventilation mode, oxygen I/2 ratio, and you have to look at the X-ray. Frequency is specific to the lung disease, compliance, and gestation. Tidal volume is set lowest for the frequencies and adjusted accordingly. Set realistic amplitude to accommodate above settings. Keep I/2 ratio 1:2, and keep monitoring the DCO2 amplitude trends, take transcutaneous CO2, SATs, gas, and X-ray. Real-time responses to changes should be seen, and you should tell why you have changed. Thank you. This was one case where baby's lungs had improved. Thank you. And open for question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Monica. I have one question from Dr. Amr Abilal. What's the relation or the difference between DCO2 and PCO2?
Yeah. So when the DCO2 is more, that is going to be having a less CO2. So you are looking for a more CO2 rather than DCO2 rather than a less DCO2. So more DCO2 is going to produce less CO2. As I had
Washing. Yeah.
here.
Washing of CO2.
So DCO2, as I said, is frequency into tidal volume square. So when DCO2 is increased, it is going to be
less CO2.
Yeah. So if your DCO2 is less, that means you will have hypercapnia. If your DCO2 is going beyond a certain limit, that means you will have hypocapnia.
Okay. There is a request from Dr. Muhammad that can we get another lecture or clinical examples and cases? Dr. Yahya is telling you that we can have it. It's already Dr. Robin Alvaro from Canada will be joining us soon in a special meeting. So it will be announced later.
Can I say
that's what I was thinking, that high frequency ventilation with the example is very good. And I had a few babies on high frequency I could have given. That will be giving a more, you know, it needs a big lecture, HFOV. I just was giving a gist of it, a clinical relevance to it, and not going to the theory. But still, you need examples to know what you are going to do with the babies.
I usually start elective for babies 25, 24, 23. I start elective high frequency from the beginning. And
yeah, that's what I said, that you are doing that, and some of the people are also doing it. What we do is we are actually having a very low threshold to put on our HFOV. This is what we do. If we don't allow a baby, a small baby going at pip of more than 20, if the baby is requiring more than 20 pip, I'm putting the baby on a HFOV.
And also I have advice is probably if you exceed the 24 or 48 hours of ventilation on high frequency, you probably need a good sedation. Babies start not tolerating the because of the sedation. So and I want to say the DCO2, I want to say to Amr, is the CO2 is the diffusion. So more diffusion, less CO2.
Yeah.
It's the coefficient of the CO2 diffusion, and there is a correction with the weight. With the weight, you can correct it with the weight. There is values corrected with the weight. So it's a diffusion of CO2.
Yeah. So if the carbon dioxide is diffused more, definitely it is going to be
less
decreased. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have one question from Dr. Muhammad. Is amplitude equal to tidal volume? Is it measured in milliliters? What are the limits? 3 questions. Is the amplitude equal to the tidal volume? That was the first question.
No, amplitude is not equal to the tidal volume. You are keeping the tidal volume 1 to 2 ml per kg, and the amplitude is adjusted according to the tidal volume what you have kept. So the amplitude will automatically get adjusted, and according to the tidal volume you want to give to that baby. So it's not the same.
So the tidal volume in high frequency,
the amplitude is in centimeter water.
The tidal volume in high frequency is a little bit tricky, and it's different from the tidal volume in convention.
Yeah, not the same.
It's actually the dead space. So you're measuring the dead space, or the ventilator will not allow you to exceed the dead space, and therefore you don't have volumetrauma. That's the beauty of high frequency.
Yeah.
There was one question from Dr. Muhammad Hamid. Is there a relation between MAP and tidal volume? Like, for example, can we put a tidal volume, sorry, can the tidal volume be 3 times higher than the map? That is the question.
No.
I think
tidal volume how can be 3 times higher than map? Then it will be like, I don't know, it will be an extra,
I think
it cannot happen. The only thing what relationship it has is that if you have too much of a higher map, you may be actually causing a problem with the wriggling, and that's why you will be causing CO2 retention. And then you reduce the map. But there is no relationship between what I said is amplitude. So I think everyone is getting confused between the amplitude and the tidal volume. So amplitude is the one which you are keeping, which will be beating the lungs like this, that, you have set a map like this. Are you able to see me? My hand?
Yes, Doctora.
Yeah. So you are actually keeping a map like this, and then you are keeping, you are beating the thing, the amplitude is beating like this. So the amplitude is not exactly the tidal volume, but it will result in a production of the tidal volume. So the amplitude, what we are keeping is the wriggling, how much the pressure is required for the wriggling of the baby. And that's why it is if you see the where it is, it is centimeter water. It is not ml per kg. So when we start, we are giving how much to set is 2 times the map. That is what we are keeping amplitude.
Yes.
And by keeping that much of amplitude, we are thinking that we are going to deliver the tidal volume of 1 to 2 ml per kg. But usually this will not happen because you don't know exactly how much amplitude is going to produce that much of tidal volume. And that's why we added volume guarantee, which means that if I am achieving a tidal volume of 1 to 2 ml per kg, this much of amplitude the ventilator would give to achieve this much of a tidal volume. If I'm not able to achieve that much of a tidal volume, it will tell the ventilator that this amplitude is not enough. So the ventilator will itself increase the amplitude to give that much of the tidal volume. And the opposite will happen. If the tidal volume achieved is too much, more than 1 to 2 ml per kg, then the ventilator will know that more volume is being given to the baby, and it will automatically reduce the amplitude so as to give that much tidal volume as we want. So this is how the volume guarantee would be working in a HFOV. Got my point? And then there is a max which you have to set, because it should not happen that it crosses that max, and that max what you set is 2 times the map. Am I clear?
I think it should be, yeah. Yes, thanks. I got a reply. He's telling you yes, thanks. I think he got the idea. And after all of these modes, Dr. Monica, you have explained, end of the day, the best mode to use is the one that you know very well to apply to your patient, isn't it?
Yes. Always when your unit is there, all the nurses should be comfortable on whatever mode you are using. You should not go ahead and say, okay, I learned today this, I'm going to use this in my unit. When the nurses have no idea and you are there only for 5 minutes and going away, and the nurses are there 24 hours. And also the registrars who are taking care of the baby should all be well aware of this kind of ventilation, whatever mode you are using.
Dr. Yahya?
Yes, ma'am, tell me.
Rola speaking. I think if we have no more questions, would you like to end the session?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Dr. Monica. I do not have a question. It was a very good presentation. I know it's very complicated, especially for people you're not using it, and adding high frequency to the VG, adding to it more complicated. My suggestion is not to use VG first, unless you are, very comfortable with high frequency, and then you can start to add VG. Don't use the DCO2 also, that would be my advice. And then be familiar, use the high frequency, and then you can add more and more once you are more comfortable.
What you're saying, Dr. Yahya, is very right, that you should be looking into clinical things more and the X-ray and blood gases to decide on whether you are going in a right path or not. Because that's what we, when we started our journey for high frequency ventilation, that's what we did. We didn't have this DCO2. We had, or we didn't even see what is DCO2. Only with time we could know. But, and DCO2 may be fallacious sometimes also. That's another issue, but that's another point. But when you're putting a baby on a high frequency, last clear take-home messages, when you are putting a baby on a high frequency ventilator, simple rule is that you have to, unless you are Dr. Yahya, you are doing it not electively, but when you are failed. So you are putting a map of 2 above the map what you are using on the conventional mode of ventilator. Until unless you have using it for pneumothorax, then you will use less map, same or 1 less. And then you will use a frequency of 8 to 10 for term babies and 12 to 14 for smaller babies. That's what you will do. And you will use 2 times the amplitude, 2 times the map, that amplitude you will use. And FiO2 you will use to begin with the same as what you are using in conventional ventilator, and then you will come down. And then you will stand there, look at the chest, how much is the chest rise. If it is too much, you will come down on the map there only. If it is too less, you will increase the map therein. And also you will look at the wriggling. If the wriggling is too much going below the umbilicus, you will decrease the amplitude. If the wriggling is too less, just on the upper part of the chest, you will increase your amplitude therein. So these are the clinical parameters where you will stand and change your map and the amplitude standing there. Afterwards, you will do an X-ray and you will look at the lung spaces. You will look at the right side of the chest and look at the rib spaces up to the diaphragm. And you will be looking at 9 ribs, which are good for you, 9, 9.5. More than that is overinflation, so you will come down on the map. Less than that, less than 8 would be underinflation, and you will increase the map. And when you do a blood gas, you will see the carbon dioxide. If you have CO2 washout, you will reduce your amplitude. If you have CO2 build up too much, then you will increase your amplitude. So this is how simply you can go ahead and work on your high frequency ventilator.
The other things I want to say about high frequency, it's very labor demanding. So you need lots of nursing. And the second thing is can fluctuate easy, especially if there is a block or secretion. So you can get CO2 of 120 and all of a sudden it's 125. So you need very careful, you need monitoring, you need to have a good staff, you need probably respiratory therapist or nursing. So you need to be careful. If you don't have those, you probably go with conventional, better for you.
Yeah. One more and last question about the leak. I think there's a special concern about leak. How can you check the 80 tube leak when the baby is on a high frequency?
Again, so that is what I told. The wriggling will be a problem. Where did I say? Wriggling problem will come with a very high leak. The baby will stop. Wriggling will stop. So, so wiggle factor, I told that if your leak is too much or disconnection has happened or obstruction has happened, your wiggling is going to be diminished or absent. This is how you will be able to know immediately.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you again, Dr. Monica. I'm very, very grateful for you. That's maybe
thank you, Dr. Yahya.
Thank you very much. Thank you again and again. It was very good. It's a difficult topic, especially for those not using it.
I was given half an hour for HFOV, so I was thinking what to do. So I just chose this because I had many more different presentation for it.
I know. Believe me, I have a presentation on high frequency 420 slide.
Yeah, I have to.
very long. You know,
Yeah.
each section needs lots of talk, and
Yeah.
especially if you are train your people. So
Yeah.
thank you very much again. Thank you everybody for attending. See you in next session.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day
Bye.
or a good night.
Thank you.